My niece made a TikTok mocking my Walmart clothes and calling me the poor relative. It got 2 million views. She did not know her $1.8 million trust fund came from me with a character clause. Her 21st birthday was in 2 weeks. The fund manager saw the video. So did I. I sat in my Honda Accord, the leather cold against my palms. Rain tapped the glass like a rhythmic ticking clock. Brianna thought she was exposing a secret. She was only exposing herself. The office of Holloway Private Equity was silent at midnight. I pulled up the dashboard on my monitor. Rows of green numbers glowed against the dark room. My firm managed nearly $1 billion. Yet my sister-in-law still sent me coupons for generic cereal. I touched the screen, watching Brianna's face pixelate into a sneer. She looked so much like her mother. They both mistook my silence for a lack of resources. They never realized that the most powerful person is often the quietest. The comments section was a digital firing squad. One stranger asked if I needed a GoFundMe for a new sweater. Brianna had liked that comment. I felt a strange, cold clarity settle in my chest. Howard Piton called my private line at 6 in the morning. His voice was like dry parchment rubbing together. He asked if I had seen the footage. I told him I had watched it 4 times. He reminded me about Section 4 of the trust. My hand gripped the coffee mug. Section 4 was my insurance policy against the rot of vanity. It required the beneficiary to maintain basic human decency and public integrity. Brianna had spent years treating me like a servant at family dinners. I had endured the snide remarks about my old car and my lack of jewelry. I did it for my brother, Marcus. But this public humiliation was a different beast entirely. It was a choice to profit from cruelty. I opened the digital file and hovered my mouse over the document. The deletion of a trust fund is a remarkably quiet affair. I scrolled through the legalese until I found the secondary beneficiary designation. It was a small scholarship fund for kids who actually worked for their future. With a single digital signature, the $1.8 million vanished from Brianna's reach. The money did not belong to her anymore. It belonged to 14 students who would never mock a stranger for their clothes. My brother's daughter was about to have a very expensive birthday party. I drove to the mall that afternoon. I did not go to the designer boutiques where Brianna spent my money. I went back to the same store she mocked in her video. I bought a new sweater in a soft, unassuming gray. It felt warm and honest against my skin. The cashier smiled at me, unaware she was talking to a woman who owned the city skyline. I walked out into the bright winter sun. My niece was still posting updates about her party. She had no idea she was bankrupt. The legal reality felt heavy in my pocket as I walked into the kitchen. Howard had sent the confirmation receipt via a secure link. It was a digital ghost of $1.8 million. I found my brother Marcus sitting at the wooden table. He was staring at a glossy brochure for a European cruise. He didn't look up when I entered. He just tapped a finger against a photo of a luxury suite. I smelled the bitter scent of burnt toast. Marcus cleared his throat and pointed at the paper. He said that Kendra wanted to celebrate Brianna's birthday in style. They were planning to book the trip once the trust cleared. He looked tired but hopeful. I felt a sharp pang of pity for him. He had no idea his wife was already spending money that no longer existed. He didn't know about the TikTok video either. I kept my face neutral and poured a glass of cold water. The front door slammed open with a violent bang. Kendra marched into the room with her phone held out like a weapon. She was wearing a designer tracksuit that probably cost more than my car. Her eyes were bright with a strange, manic energy. She didn't say hello or ask how I was doing. She just shoved the screen toward my face. The blue light reflected off her polished teeth. She was smiling, but it looked like a threat. "Look at these engagement numbers, Kylie," she chirped. She told me that Brianna was finally becoming a real star. The video of me at dinner was trending in 3 different states. She laughed and said that being a charity case was finally paying off for me. I looked at Marcus to see if he would stop her. He just looked down at his toast. He chose the path of least resistance. I felt the last tie to them snap. Kylie is so humble she doesn't even care, Kendra continued. She patted my shoulder with a hand that felt like a claw. She said that the publicity might even help me find a better job. I watched her count the virtual likes on the screen. She was building a house of cards on a windy cliff. I thought about the scholarship fund documents, sitting in my car. Those students were already receiving their acceptance letters. The money was gone. I set my glass down on the granite counter with a soft click. I told her that I hoped the views were worth the cost. Kendra narrowed her eyes and asked me what that was supposed to mean. She thought I was being jealous of her daughter's sudden fame. I just smiled and told her to enjoy the party planning. She didn't notice the way I used the past tense. She was too busy checking her daughter's latest ranking video. The room felt suddenly too small for 3 people. I grabbed my keys and headed toward the hallway. Marcus finally looked up and asked if I was staying for dinner. I told him I had a meeting with a financial administrator. He nodded blindly and went back to his brochure. Behind me, I heard Kendra calling a caterer to upgrade the champagne. She was ordering the most expensive bottles on the menu. She was charging it to a ghost. The office was a tomb of glass and steel. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the city lights flicker. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. It was an alert from the foundation I used to hide my identity. The first scholarship student had just accepted her award. She was a single mother from the South Side. Her gratitude was a quiet contrast to the chaos brewing in my own family. The shift had officially begun. I checked my private bank portal to confirm the wire transfer. The $1.8 million was gone from the trust account. It sat now in an escrow fund for the college. Howard walked in with a stack of physical folders. He placed them on the desk with a heavy thud. He told me that Kendra had called his office 3 times today. She was trying to confirm the exact balance of the fund. Howard had simply ignored the calls. He asked me if I was ready for the fallout. I told him I had been ready for 20 years. My family only saw a quiet woman with a cheap car. They never bothered to look at the name on the buildings I funded. Howard handed me a pen for the final signature. I felt the weight of the metal in my hand. It was the instrument of my justice. I signed the last page with a steady, firm stroke. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into a different world. I walked into the parking garage where my old Honda waited. It looked small and battered among the rows of luxury SUVs. I thought about the way Brianna filmed me in this car. She called it a relic of a failed life. She did not know that the engine was custom rebuilt. It was a machine designed for endurance, much like its owner. I started the car. I stopped at a red light near the downtown mall. I saw a massive digital billboard flashing an advertisement. It featured a group of local influencers celebrating a brand launch. Brianna was in the background, laughing and holding a designer bag. The bag likely cost $4,000. I knew she had bought it on credit. She was betting her entire future on a payday that was never going to arrive. The light turned green and I drove. My phone chimed with a group text message from Kendra. She sent a photo of a gold-plated invitation. It was for the rooftop gala in 2 weeks. The theme was written in a swirling, arrogant script. It read finally legal to be this fabulous. She told the group that everyone should dress to impress. She specifically tagged me and asked me to try harder this time. I deleted the message without replying to her. I pulled into my driveway and saw a courier waiting. He handed me a small, heavy box wrapped in plain brown paper. It was from a boutique in Milan that I had visited last summer. Inside was a single silk scarf worth more than Brianna's entire wardrobe. I ran the fabric through my fingers in the dark. It was a beautiful thing that nobody would ever see me wear. I heard a loud car horn behind me. The car horn belonged to Kendra's silver Porsche. She idled in my driveway with a smug expression on her face. She rolled down the window and tossed a heavy garment bag toward me. It landed on the gravel with a soft thud. Kendra told me it was a gift for the party. She said I could not show up in my usual rags. I picked it up and felt the cheap, scratchy sequins through the thin fabric. I looked at the tag inside the garment bag. It was a knockoff of a famous brand I actually own in silk. Kendra laughed and said it was a big step up for me. She told me she had secured a massive loan for the rooftop catering. She was certain the trust money would cover the interest within weeks. I realized then how deep her financial hole truly went. She was gambling with a life that was already over. "Kylie, you look so tired," Kendra said with a fake pout. She suggested that maybe my little investment job was finally drying up. I told her that I was doing better than she could possibly imagine. She just rolled her eyes and checked her reflection in the mirror. She didn't hear the warning in my voice. She only heard the sound of her own social status rising. I watched her drive away, kicking up gray dust. I went inside and opened my laptop on the kitchen island. A notification appeared from my security firm. Someone had tried to log into the trust fund portal from a local IP address. I checked the logs and saw Brianna's name. She was trying to guess the password to see her balance early. My pulse quickened as I watched the failed attempts pile up. She was desperate for a peek at her new reality. The screen flickered as a new video notification popped up. Brianna was live on TikTok again. She was showing off a pair of diamond earrings she just bought on credit. She told her followers that her poor aunt would never understand this life. The comments were scrolling by in a blur of emojis and hate. I watched her flaunt the jewelry like it was a shield. She didn't know the shield was made of glass. I called Howard back and asked him to freeze the online portal entirely. I told him the beneficiary was attempting unauthorized access. He said he would lock it down within the hour. He also mentioned that Marcus had called him privately to ask for a personal loan. My brother was drowning and too proud to tell me the truth. He was hiding behind his wife's delusions. I felt the weight of my secrets getting heavier. I spent the rest of the night reviewing the scholarship applications. I needed to focus on the people who actually deserved a future. One young man wrote about working 3 jobs to support his mother. His essay was raw and full of a quiet, burning dignity. I approved his full ride with a single click of my mouse. It felt better than any revenge. My phone buzzed with one final text from my brother Marcus. Marcus asked if I could meet him at the local park. He looked small on the bench, hunched under a frayed jacket. He confessed that the party expenses were spiraling out of control. Kendra had already spent $40,000 on credit for the venue. He begged me for a bridge loan until Brianna's trust fund hit. I stared at his tired eyes and felt a deep, hollow ache. I told him I simply did not have that money. My brother flinched as if I had struck him across the face. He muttered that he should have expected that answer from me. He said I was always too tight with my meager savings. I wanted to scream that I was currently funding his funder's entire existence. Instead, I stood up and smoothed my sensible wool coat. I told him that some lessons are worth more than cash. He didn't understand. He just looked away, shivering in the cold. The night of the gala arrived with a sharp, biting wind. I wore my simple black dress and the Milan silk scarf. I hid the expensive fabric under the scratchy sequined wrap Kendra gave me. The rooftop venue was a sea of flashing lights and expensive perfumes. I saw Brianna holding court near a massive ice sculpture of herself. She was wearing a dress that cost more than a mid-range sedan. She looked triumphant and utterly vapid. The DJ lowered the music as Brianna grabbed a wireless microphone. She thanked everyone for coming to witness her official arrival. She looked directly at me and smirked in the bright camera light. She said that being legal meant she finally controlled her own destiny. She thanked the mystery donor for the money she was about to spend. The crowd cheered as Kendra stepped up to the stage. She was holding a champagne bottle worth a week of my salary. Kendra announced that the trust administrator was waiting in the VIP lounge. She told Brianna it was time to sign for her millions. My phone buzzed with a final message from Howard. He was in position and ready to execute the public reading. I saw him emerge from the shadows in his steel gray suit. He looked like a funerary director in a room full of peacocks. The influencers turned their cameras toward him. Sensing a viral moment, Brianna literally skipped toward the center of the illuminated stage. She asked Howard for the big check or the bank codes. Howard opened his leather portfolio and adjusted his glasses with precision. He spoke into the microphone with a voice that cut through the music. He stated that the Holloway Trust was subject to a final character review. The room went silent as the word review hung in the air. Brianna's smile faltered for the very first time. Howard began reading the transcript of the Walmart video word for word. Every cruel remark echoed across the rooftop in a flat, clinical tone. I watched Brianna's face turn from pink to a ghostly, mottled white. Kendra tried to interrupt, but Howard held up a hand to stop her. He announced that the trust was officially dissolved for a breach of integrity. Then he looked at me and revealed the benefactor's name. Every camera in the room turned. The silence on the rooftop was a physical weight. 200 phones remained raised, their lenses capturing every twitch of Brianna's face. Howard cleared his throat and looked directly at my table. He announced that Kylie was the sole architect of the family's comfort for decades. He detailed the private equity firm and the beach houses she owned in silence. Kendra let out a strangled sound that was half laugh and half sob. The champagne bottle slipped from her hand and shattered on the expensive tile. Kylie is the poor aunt, Brianna whispered, her voice cracking over the speakers. She looked at me as if I were a stranger she had just met. I stood up and let the scratchy sequined wrap fall to the floor. Underneath, the Milan silk glowed with a soft, undeniable luster. I walked toward the stage with slow and steady steps. The influencers parted for me like water. I saw my brother Marcus leaning against a pillar, his face buried in his hands. Brianna reached out a trembling hand toward Howard's leather portfolio. She asked if this was just a prank for her channel. She begged him to say the money was still there. Howard stepped back and closed the folder with a sharp snap. He told her the funds had already been wired to the secondary beneficiary. The college scholarship fund was now the legal owner of her fortune. She had traded her entire life for 2 million fleeting likes. The DJ turned off the music. Kendra lunged toward me, her face twisted with a primal, desperate rage. She screamed that I had no right to steal her daughter's future. She tried to grab my arm, but I caught her wrist with a firm grip. I told her that I didn't steal anything. I simply stopped providing a gift that was being used as a weapon. Kendra looked at the crowd and realized they were still filming her meltdown. She was the new content now. The hunters had become the prey. You knew, Brianna sobbed, looking at her mother with sudden realization. She asked why Kendra let her make the video if they were dependent on me. Kendra couldn't answer, because she had been the one who encouraged the mockery. She thought my humility was a sign of weakness she could exploit forever. I looked at Brianna and saw the ruined makeup running down her cheeks. She looked like a child who had finally realized the stove was hot. It was a pathetic sight. I turned to Howard and thanked him for his impeccable service tonight. He gave me a brief, professional nod and headed toward the elevator. The crowd began to murmur as the realization of my net worth spread. Some of the influencers started tagging me in their posts. They were trying to pivot their loyalty to the person with the actual power. I ignored them all. I only had eyes for my brother. Marcus finally looked up, his eyes red and full of shame. Marcus walked over and asked why I had kept the wealth a secret. I told him I wanted to see who they were when I had nothing. I reminded him of the 20 years of silence he gave me during their insults. He had traded his sister's dignity for his wife's approval. He looked at the shattered champagne and the ice sculpture melting in the wind. There was nothing left to say. The family I thought I had was just a collection of debts. The wind picked up, whipping my silk scarf around my neck. I looked at Brianna and told her the video was still trending. I said that she should check the comments one last time. People were already mocking her for being the girl who fumbled nearly $2 million. The internet was a fickle beast that fed on the fallen. She collapsed onto a velvet chair, her custom dress bunching up around her. She looked small and hollow. Her phone screen was still glowing. Kendra tried one last time to negotiate a monthly allowance for the family. She promised they would all apologize publicly and delete every social media account. I told her that an apology bought with a checkbook is not a real apology. I had already sold the house they were living in. It was in my name, and the closing date was in 30 days. Marcus gasped, but Kendra just stared at me in shock. The safety net was gone. They were finally on their own. I walked toward the rooftop exit without looking back at the wreckage. My old Honda was waiting in the street below, outshining every Porsche in the lot. I felt a strange sense of lightness as I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed on the sound of Brianna's hysterical crying. I reached into my pocket and felt the cool metal of my keys. As the elevator reached the lobby, my phone buzzed with a new alert. The scholarship students were starting a group chat. The lobby was cold and smelled of expensive floor wax. I stepped out of the elevator and saw my reflection in the polished marble. I did not look like a woman who had just destroyed her family. I looked like a woman who had finally cleared a cluttered room. The security guard nodded as I passed the desk. He had no idea that the silent person in the gray coat was the owner of his paycheck. I walked out into the biting wind. I reached my car and sat in the dark for a moment. The engine hummed to life with a low and steady growl. My phone screen lit up with a dozen missed calls from Marcus. He was likely realizing the full extent of the eviction notice. I had given them 30 days to find a new reality. It was more than they had ever given me. I put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb. The city looked different now. The drive home was a blur of neon signs and wet asphalt. I thought about the scholarship group chat I had seen earlier. Those kids were talking about textbooks and meal plans. They were excited about things Brianna took for granted every single day. Their gratitude felt like a warm fire against the icy memory of the rooftop. I realized that my wealth was finally doing the work it was meant to do. It was building lives instead of ego. I pulled into my driveway and saw a figure huddled on my porch. It was Brianna, still wearing that ridiculous and ruined designer dress. She looked like a drowned bird in the yellow porch light. Her makeup had stained the white fabric of her bodice. She had left her phone and purse behind in the chaos of the rooftop. I killed the engine and stepped out into the cold air. She looked up and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. "I am sorry," she whispered as I walked up the concrete steps. She said she had walked all the way from the rooftop venue. Her expensive heels were scuffed and broken at the back. I told her that sorry was a word people used when they got caught. She grabbed the hem of my coat and begged me to listen. She promised to do anything to fix the mistake. I looked at her hand and then back at her face. It was far too late. I opened my front door and told her she could stay for one night. I wasn't a monster. But I wasn't a fool either. She followed me inside, her wet shoes squeaking on the hardwood. The house was quiet and smelled of cedar and old books. She looked around at the simple furniture with a confused expression. She still couldn't understand why a millionaire lived like this. I pointed toward the guest room and told her to get some sleep. She asked if we could talk about the trust fund in the morning. I told her there was nothing left to discuss with her. The paperwork was filed and the money was legally gone. She started to cry again, a soft and pathetic sound. I went into the kitchen and made a cup of herbal tea. My hands were perfectly steady as I poured the boiling water. I felt a strange sense of finality. The game was over for everyone. I sat at the table and opened my laptop one last time. I saw a news alert about the rooftop gala incident. Someone had leaked the video of the trust fund dissolution. It was already being dubbed the most expensive mistake in social media history. People were praising the mysterious aunt for her bold move. I closed the tab and shut the screen. I didn't need the world's approval any more than I needed Brianna's. I just needed some rest. I heard a soft knock on my bedroom door an hour later. It was Marcus, standing in the hallway with a look of pure defeat. He had arrived shortly after his daughter. He told me that Kendra had left him. She had packed her bags as soon as she realized the house was gone. He looked at Brianna's shoes in the hallway and sighed. He asked if he could stay here too. I looked at my brother and saw the man he used to be. The greed had stripped him bare. I told him he could sleep on the sofa for now. I warned him that I was selling this house too. I was moving to the beach house in Malibu, where nobody knew my name. He asked what they were supposed to do for money. I told him that I had left a Walmart application on the counter. It was a humble beginning for a very long road. He didn't say a word. He just walked toward the kitchen and started to cry. When the morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, it cast long shadows across the Walmart application. Marcus stared at the paper, as if it were written in a foreign language. Brianna emerged from the guest room, her face pale and devoid of her usual arrogance. She didn't ask for a ladder or check her follower count. She just sat down and watched the steam rise from a chipped ceramic mug. The silence was absolute. The flashy world they built had vanished overnight. I packed my leather suitcase with the few items I truly valued. My designer silk scarves sat nestled against my favorite cotton sweaters. I was leaving the house that had served as my shield for 2 decades. Marcus followed me to the door, his eyes darting toward the driveway. He asked if I would at least leave the Honda for them to use. I shook my head and gripped my keys tight. They needed to walk the path they had mocked. We reached the car and I paused to look back at the suburban house. It was just a structure of wood and brick. It held no warmth for me anymore. Brianna stood on the porch, shivering in a borrowed sweatshirt that smelled of lavender detergent. She looked like a ghost of the girl from the viral video. I told her that character is what remains when the money is gone. She didn't look away this time. She just nodded slowly. The drive to Malibu was quiet and meditative. I watched the city skyline fade in the rearview mirror. My phone buzzed with a notification from Howard. He confirmed that the scholarship students had received their first checks. One girl had sent a video of herself crying with joy in her dorm room. It was the only content I cared to watch. I felt a profound sense of lightness. My true work was finally beginning in the open light. I pulled up to the beach house just as the tide was coming in. The salt air felt clean and sharp against my skin. I took off my shoes and walked toward the shoreline. The water was freezing, but it felt like a baptism. I was no longer the poor aunt or the secret millionaire. I was simply Kylie. I watched a seagull circle above the crashing waves. My phone rang with a call from an unknown number. I answered the phone and heard a familiar, trembling voice on the other end. It was Kendra, calling from a payphone at a bus station. She wasn't screaming or demanding money this time. She sounded small and terrified. She asked if I knew where Marcus was. I looked out at the vast blue horizon and felt nothing at all. I hung up the phone and tossed it into the deep sand. I was finally alone and perfectly at peace.